let's begin with a friend of the show, Tim, Brad Treliving, Flames GM. He is on the line, and he is joining us today. Brad, how are things with you? How's the family? How's everybody doing?
Hey, guys, we're doing good out here. All things being considered, we've got nothing to complain about, and hopefully you guys are doing well.
Yep, we're doing pretty well, all things considered as well. Before we get to the hockey, we had your dad on the show a couple weeks ago. We were shooting the breeze, and we got to talk about his presence in the picture of the Kawhi Leonard iconic Game 7 winner versus the Sixers, and how stoic he was in said moment. Have you ever got into him about how he appears in the picture of Kawhi Leonard's game winner?
Tim, that's my childhood in a nutshell right there, basically. There's, what was that? I kind of said to him, he likes to think that he was steely, locked in, focused.
Stoic.
I'm like, you don't even know you're at a game, for God's sake. I mean, have a little emotion, man.
But he's a dragon, Brad. He's a dragon. He just can't jump up and do the wave and stuff. Like he's their expectation.
He's a dragon. I think he had bad seats. Guys were standing up in front of him. He was probably solid.
Sit down.
Sit down.
Brad, there's kind of it's weird right now in hockey. There's a lot to talk about, and there isn't. What is your day like right now?
You know what, Sid? It's like at the time that this started, you're like, okay, what are we going to do? What I found is you're busy. It's just different, and we keep calling it the new normal. I think 60 days in or whatever we're in now, it's just become the normal. So what we've kind of done is sort of put things in three separate piles and pick away at them. And you've got, one of them's being the draft. At some point we'll have a draft here. And so there's all the things that you have to prepare for a draft. You have to go through. It's given us, in a lot of ways, you try to find, make the very best of the situation you're in and find what opportunities may be available to you. For me, for the draft, it's allowed me to probably get to know the players a lot better than I normally might. When you start looking later in the draft, you're watching a lot of video. Our staff has done a real good job of that. We're doing, all the web calls and the video calls. So all the preparation for draft in one file. You've got the restart, relaunch file. So all the things that you're going to be involved in with that. Getting players back, how would we do a training camp, all the preparation that goes into all that. And then eventually you're going to get to the preparations for 2021. So the off-season file. So everything that, on free agency, all the preparations for that. So we find you sort of, put everything into a separate pile and you pick away at it. And what we found is you've found a way to keep yourself busy each day.
Brad Treliving joining us here on Tim and Sid. So do you know when that draft preparation will come to fruition?
We don't. Like you guys, we've heard, I think probably a week or so, maybe it's been a couple weeks now, where there was some momentum for the June draft, having the draft in June. I think that the league is looking hard, and I get it. I personally, if you're asking me, I would prefer to have a draft once the season is done. Once you're, because it's not just the drafting of players; it's really the time that you reset your team and you look at the different moves that are made at the draft and so on and so forth. Having said that, I get from the league's perspective, it is in June. There's so many things that are on the list right now. At some point, you got to start checking some boxes, and you can't keep kicking things down the road. But that's a long-winded way, Tim, of saying I don't know. I don't know when it is right now.
But that's the game that we're all playing, right? And that's the left and the right of it, Sid, is just absolutely understanding both sides of it.
And also being selfish. Like, Brad, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, talking draft, and we talked to Renaud Lavoie earlier in the show. I can't go through watching a draft without creeping all over you guys before the draft on the floor with a camera, wondering who you're speaking to and what does that mean? Why is Brad Treliving speaking to Don Waddell? Tim, what do you think of this? I don't know. Yeah. What could be happening here? Like, these are I watch the draft now after a certain point, not for the draft. Now, I know your world is very different from mine, Brad, but I can't picture a person in your situation not being allowed to at least reset yourself financially in different ways while you draft. How much input have you had in this? How much input have other GMs around the league had in this?
Well, they've certainly asked everybody's opinion and get a sense for it. And I think that's the biggest, you hit on the biggest thing, Sid, is just, when you talk about doing it in quote unquote the off season, is just all those types of situations. And every team is different and every year is a little bit different, right? You may be in a situation cap wise. Last year we came through, an interesting time, probably the first, it was a unique time where there was a number of teams, and we were certainly one of them, that had these really, top end young RFA players. And, sort of this, I don't want to say a market reset, but you saw, the contracts that a lot of these guys were getting. So it requires you to do some things with your team to make sure you've got space and all the rest of it. You've got certain players at certain times that are, what they've got left in their career, where they've got a year left in their career, or their contract has expired and they're an RFA. And how does that fit within, your salary structure? So all those types of things, it just fits within the flow of the season. And like I said, it comes back to the terminology I said about trying to reset your team. But again, you also have to recognize we're in a new landscape here. And I think any way that you cut it right now, I think the draft is going to be a virtual one, which we saw, the NFL, we saw the CFL. I think your point is a really good one. The unique thing about our draft is that, I think we're the only league that everybody shows up in one place, and, you've got everybody in hockey in one location, and it allows you to, dialogue directly with people. So, but hey, we're in a new age. We're dealing with, the whole world is dealing with us, and we'll make whatever changes we need to make. And at the end of the day, we'll get through it.
Brad Treliving, General Manager, Calgary Flames, joining us here on Tim and Sid. We were hearing, whispers of what the BC Premier said earlier today, and it was basically more talk about this hub city idea, and maybe that BC is trying to make a play to not only be a hub city, but be the hub city. Does the hub city idea, whatever way it manifests itself, seem like the most viable conclusion to this season?
Yeah, Tim, I think it does. I think in whatever form or fashion that might be, it just seems that the idea that you're going to be able to open up in, 16 or 24 or 30, however the resumption of play goes, if you're opening up in 31 cities to to finish out the regular season, or if you're going directly into a playoff, and whether that's 16, 20, 18, however many, it just seems that there's not consistency from, location to location in terms of what they're dealing with the, not only the virus, but, what the governmental restrictions may be. So I don't know if it's feasible to think that, everybody's going to get to the same place at the same time. So I think looking at, whether it be 1, 2, 4, 6, somewhat of a scaled down locations where you're going to get people to, probably makes the most sense. I think that's probably the most, logical conclusion for sure.
Flames GM Brad Treliving here on Tim and Sid. Guys, I feel like the momentum towards possibly finishing out the regular season is completely over. Am I wrong in saying that, Brad? Like we've seen a bunch of reports, Elliot Friedman among them, that this would be a jump into some kind of newer playoff format, and then go. Are you thinking along the same wavelength?
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest with you, Sid, nobody's told us that. I just look at it similar to you, that you hear some of the scuttlebutt. I keep coming back to the calendar, right? I just keep coming back to the calendar and saying, okay, when we paused, what were we? We're 60 days into this, aren't we? Like, we paused around the 13th or 14th. So you're probably, give or take, about 3.5 weeks left in the regular season. So whenever you come back and you start, you just start doing the math of saying, okay, at some point, hopefully we get to a phase 2 where the facilities are open and guys are starting to able to access it. And then you get, at a period after that, you get into a training camp for a period of time. Then if you're looking at trying to complete 3.5 weeks, I mean, you just may run out of runway here at some point. Because, obviously you're trying to keep 2021 as intact as best you can. Eventually you're just going to run out of time. So I think with each day that goes by, that idea probably becomes less likely, that idea of completing the regular season or the full one. Maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's, you're getting to, we'll probably get to 76 games. I don't know. But I would tend to agree with you on that. Listen, everybody wants to, and I think that, we're all sort of that type A that you wanted to get going yesterday. I think it's important, though, we all keep in mind, and we've said it before, everybody wants to get back and play. Everybody wants to finish. Everybody wants to have a conclusion. But I think it's important that we also take our proper place in the pecking order here. At the end of the day, it's like the opening question of how you doing. At the end of the day, we're like probably everybody else. We've been sitting on top. I know in my house, we start barking at each other every now and again, but then you take a step back and say, you know what, we're doing pretty good, because we know there's people that are dealing with a hell of a lot worse than we are. So at the appropriate time, when it's safe, we all want to get back, but we know there's much more important things and people dealing with much more serious issues than we are right now. So whatever time's left to complete what we got to complete, hopefully we're able to do that.
Sounds like you're in my house as I lost my voice saying get off the video games, and then realized that if we're playing video games, we're in a really good spot. One of the conversations that Sid and I had was the economy of Alberta, and obviously the entire country, the world's economic situation is going to change. It has been altered by this. Alberta might be the province that gets hit hardest in Canada, and obviously any way to bring in some economic growth is probably going to be looked at very kindly by the premier of your province. Is Calgary still in the mix of being a hub city? Are you guys interested in? I know that the NHL has talked to Edmonton. Is Calgary still in that mix?
I don't think we are, Tim. I think we would certainly love the opportunity. I think, I just don't think. I don't think it's progressed to that point where we're in that mix.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. Anything that, it's been, obviously we're all dealing with the virus, and in some cases there's hotspots more than others, but it's affected everybody. And then you take into consideration, along with that, the economic challenges we've had here in Alberta. It certainly would be good. Anything that we can do to stimulate, anything we can do to help with people's spirit, anything at all. I think that's part of the role we have in the business that we're in. Is we're competitive, and you want to win, and you want to do all of these other things. But if we can be a distraction to what people are going through right now, I think that's a really important thing. Again, at the right time, and make sure it's done properly. But certainly, we know that there's been a lot of pain in Alberta, to say the least, and hopefully we can help with that.
Flames GM Brad Treliving joining us here on Tim and Sid. The other news of the week here, Brad, is the AHL schedule. The rest of the season was officially canceled, unfortunately. And I know you have enough players on the big league roster with questions. There's now some guys from Stockton kind of wondering the same thing. So I'll pitch it to you and again, I'm not suggesting you know anything. None of us know a lot right now, but whenever this playoff begins, how big a roster will yourself and potentially 23 other GMs need when this gets going again? Like, what do you have a number in your head of the number of players you're going to want to have either taxi squad or dressed on a given night?
Yeah, Sid, we've sort of played out a couple scenarios. I think number one is, again, depending upon how this moves forward. So we were just talking a little bit about, a regular season, potential of regular season completion. If that's not a case and you're going right into a playoff scenario, I think one of the things we've talked internally about is, and again, there's been no regulation shared or here's a limits or anything like that. But one of the things I think is important is you can come back and do, a training camp and drills and all that. But if you're going right into a playoff, that type of competitive level, especially, I think you need to do some inter squad stuff. So you'd want to make sure you've got enough people to, prepare the players accordingly. You can't be just tossing them into, go 0 to 60. So that, that's a consideration. And then certainly expanding the rosters to how many, I don't know, but I think you're going to need, is that if your rosters expand normally after the trade deadline. Anyhow, there's really no roster limit as long as you're fitting under the cap. But I think there's going to be a little bit of a combination of how do the cap rules work, which could be a challenge in some situations where you got guys on LTI and how is that going to be administered. But I think looking at, a half dozen guys or so at least that you're going to have, available to you. Because the other thing to look at this again is, you get back in, we could be at 3 months, or more by the time we get going. The players have been off.
Yeah.
And, are we all of a sudden get a week into it? And now you got, all of a sudden you went to having all these players available to guys getting injured. So certainly, for us in Stockton, we've started the process once the cancellation was done was, doing our exit interviews, talking with our players there, but also keeping them, informed that if we do get back, and that's our hope, to be prepared that there could be a group of players that could be joining us. How many? We don't know yet.
Last one, Brad, and you've been amazing with your time. But we talked to Marc Giordano last week about the story of him helping out in the community, not only a captain of your team, but a captain in the community. How nice is it to hear stories like that about your team going out and doing things in the community like Marc Giordano did, just buying groceries for people?
Well, it's like hearing good things about your kids, right? To a certain extent, you're very proud of it. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, and as a couple of people had asked me that, I knew what he was doing, and he's the last guy that's going to publicize any of that. But he's done he's been doing this stuff. Him and his wife Lauren are just, and we're thankful for all of our guys that. We got a great group that understand the part of our responsibility here. It's not just talked about. It's part of the responsibility. And it even goes back to when Brian, when Berkey was here, that's part of his DNA with his teams is this isn't volunteer. You're going to be doing this, but it's a guy like Gio. It's sort of part of his DNA. He's been buying computers. His wife goes on, finds out through these groups, people that are in need. And, the story that I know about is somebody, they need their family computer, without being asked. He shows up one day, they've got a computer. He's been buying groceries for people, unannounced, showing up at grocery stores. So it's not surprising with how he's wired and how his family is wired and his wife. And it certainly makes you very, very proud of the work that he does and all our guys do in the community. When at an important time, and he does this. He was doing this before we got into the pandemic, but he's a special guy for sure. I joked with him. He's got all these answers. He's got to help me with grade 7 math because I'm struggling with that here in some of the homeschooling.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm struggling with grade 4 math.
So hard. When did that get so difficult?
Long division with remainders. Damn you!
Well, hopefully the next math you do, Brad, is either draft related or roster related or something on ice related. So hopefully you can transition from that math to different kinds of math. So Brad, we really appreciate jumping on. It's always a pleasure. And let's do it again soon. Stay safe.
Okay. Good talking to you guys. Stay safe. Okay.